He's a controversial figure, founder of WikiLeaks and responsible for the release of thousands of secret US military and diplomatic documents. But Julian Assange is facing extradition attempts by Swedish authorities on an allegation of rape and has spent the last 3 years locked behind the walls of the Ecuadorian embassy in London, diplomatically shielded. He's now published a new book, The WikiLeaks Files, which he hopes will continue to pose hard questions, especially for the US government.
The WikiLeaks story exploded in 2010 when Julian Assange oversaw the leaking of a huge cache of classified US government material, some of which proved embarrassing to the American administration. It included footage of Reuters journalists being killed by a US helicopter gunship.
We got an RPG. All right, we got a guy with an RPG.
It was alleged the material had come from a US Army private, Bradley, now Chelsea, Manning, who was subsequently jailed for 35 years for the leak of 750,000 documents. When payment companies such as Visa, MasterCard and PayPal cut off WikiLeaks' money supply, the anonymous hacking group stepped in, flooding those companies' computers with traffic and forcing them temporarily offline. Meanwhile, Swedish prosecutors began investigating Assange for 4 alleged sexual offences. Fearing extradition to Sweden would see him end up in the US, the WikiLeaks founder fled to refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, where he's now spent 3 years. 3 of the allegations have now expired, but it'll be 5 years before the main allegation of rape lapses, leading many to ask, how long can Julian Assange stay in the Ecuadorian embassy? Julian Assange, we're sitting next to a window through which, if you stepped through it, you'd be arrested, deported to Sweden to face rape allegations. Why don't you just do what it takes to clear your name, given the importance of what this book is about?
Well, I'm glad you bring up that question because there's a lot of misinformation in the media. In fact, the situation here is that I have been given political asylum in response to a political asylum application, which all Europeans have the right to make. That political asylum application is in relation to a very serious, ongoing, pending criminal prosecution in the United States for the contents of this book. In relation to Sweden, I haven't been charged. I have already been previously cleared in that case. Neither Sweden nor the UK will promise to me or to the government of Ecuador not to extradite me to the United States. The UK says it will arrest me anyway, even if the Swedish case dissipates.
And only this week we learned that 2 British citizens were killed by a British drone strike. If you had the docs, the intel, on that drone strike right now, would it be in the public interest to release it in the way you released WikiLeaks?
Absolutely.
You would? So it would make future drone strikes impossible?
We'd have to see the actual material, but...
If it falls into your lap now on a CD, what do you do with it?
Well, we get together, a bunch of experts and publishers, we do what we normally do and publish it.
Redacting what?
Well, our policy is we will occasionally redact material for human rights grounds, but only for a limited period of time. This is a very clear policy and we've fulfilled it.
It might be clear, but why? You look at Snowden and the Snowden intelligence, this program, the program we work for, has used and seen Snowden intelligence, which we've always used in an incredibly redacted and, I would argue, responsible way. Why don't you do that?
Well, it's a question about responsible to whom. Now, through these cable publications, we have contracts with more than 110 media organizations around the world. And so we're able to compare the results across 110 different publishers. And what we see is extensive abuse of the redaction process for political purposes because of fears of libel suits and so on.
The other fear, though, is that people who want to kill us are empowered by the unredacted intelligence. Isn't the argument surely? Well, look at you came into here before ISIS before the Islamic State existed.
Well, where did the Islamic State come from?
Do you believe America created it? Are you in that school of thought?
Destabilization.
Clearly, by destabilizing Syria,
and in Iraq.
Did America create the Islamic State?
American destabilization, together with the destabilization provided by Europe in Syria and in Libya, together with the destabilization provided by US allies, Saudi, Qatar and Turkey, is what has created the Islamic State, and it is what continues to propel at the Islamic State.
And surely, you know, everybody who's a Democrat has to choose which side of that conflict they're on. Can I ask you, which side of the conflict do you stand on when the Islamic State murders a gay man for being gay?
Well, we wouldn't have an Islamic State if we had proper understanding of how foreign policy works in practice.
Was it worth putting a US private into solitary confinement and detention for 35 years, even for what you think you achieved?
That's not something that I can answer. That's only something that Chelsea Manning can answer. That's only something Chelsea Manning can answer. But the allegation there is that he was betrayed by a US journalist. Nothing to do with WikiLeaks.
No, but WikiLeaks is part of the movement that wants to do these things. Is it worth it, given the human cost to you, to her, to Snowden?
That's not really, I don't think that's really a question. Human beings and civilization can only be as good as its understanding of the reality that it has to make decisions about. So this is a very basic principle that people either believe in education, that education is important, or they don't. I'm someone who believes that education about how the world actually works, how human institutions actually behave, is really the only thing that we have. Otherwise, it's just a chaos because our decisions are not based upon understanding.
Julian Assange, thank you very much.
I've been